And you're very welcome to The Racing Room, a show so prolific in investigating potential betting and seeding into pools that the kids in the street are calling it Totes Amazeballs. Speaking of seeding and amazing balls, our new daddy in the group, father extraordinaire, and now with an heir to the AK Bets fortune, Leo Kaminskis. Congratulations, Anthony. How are we?
Thank you very much, mate. Yeah, a little bit tired, but he's sleeping away. Unlike my second child, this one's actually sleeping, so happy enough, mate. Happy enough. Good.
Listen, I just hope your parenting skills are better than your golf skills. I've seen that swing of yours, and Christ almighty, if there's an abortion of a golf swing, you have it.
Well, that went 280 yards, I'll have you know, but it was on a slight hill, so I don't think you can take that as gospel either.
Well, your swing coach needs a lot of work. So I'm going to say,
I think the ball went 280 yards to get away from the swing, AK.
Also joined by two men for whom I hope your seeding days are over, Tony Calvin. Long over at this stage, I'd say.
Yeah, I banged my two in at 23 and 24. Then I drew stumps, but so it's granddad duties now. So the second one away next month. So
good stuff.
Anyway, so it doesn't matter.
We all had an enjoyable York festival. What was the biggest bet? Can you recall, AK, off the top of your head, the biggest bet you laid on City of Troy? Do you know off the top of your head? Did someone get stuck in?
Yeah, it would have been in the region of 5K, maybe in and around that region. It was a 5-figure loser for us. That was the big one, to be honest with you, and obviously that day as well, just the multiples with the short ones as well. It was that was a losing day. Business was good over the week, not spectacular. And I think we're going to have a question later on about attendances and stuff at York and racecourses in general. But yeah, happy enough with how it went, and I think we ended up ahead over the 3 days anyway. So all good from my point.
As was I. You'll be glad to hear. I backed City of Troy, and I also I had €16 to win one on bedtime stories. So I'm looking forward to spending that euro as soon as time allows me. TC, York as a festival. You put up a little Twitter poll here. And they've got some interesting responses in terms of, what people rank as the most enjoyable racing festival. York didn't do too badly, though.
No, we got just under 2,000 answers back. Surprisingly, considering the amount of pelters it's got in the last 6 months or so. Cheltenham won by distance, 42%. York came second with 24%. And Ascot and Aintree were lagging behind. But, yeah, I mean, there was a few kind of like... dissenters about what the experience was at York last week, food, etc. And attendances were down 3.8% on the previous year. But York gets a lot.
It's not too bad.
No. Like I said, in the current climate, considering how much of their crowd that Cheltenham lost in March, they'll be very happy with that. And there were some extenuating circumstances there. I think there were some sporting events going on, musical events, and Storm Lillian affected all the trains on the Friday, which was apparently very, very quiet as a result. But yeah, York will be happy with just under 4% drop.
Somebody who didn't have a particularly good week was Jeff Banks. I don't know, we all follow Jeff on Twitter. And one of his assistants over the weekend inadvertently paid out £3,750 on a £375 bet. So the poor young fella who did that, I'm sure, is going through a pretty tough time at the moment. But the reaction to this, I thought, was interesting. TC, in that there wasn't an awful lot of sympathy for Jeff Banks here. Some people say, oh yeah, stick it to the bookmakers, good on you. I did see another Twitter poll at Nelberg Cricket who asked the question, would you pocket the money if it happened to you, or would you hand it back? 53% said they would pocket the money, 47% they would give it back. Us racing lot, we're a fairly unscrupulous bunch, are we not?
I think there's a large element of they're playing the man, not the ball there, aren't they? Because Jeff is a divisive character, and he's not short of detractors on X and Twitter and the like. And I've had a few run-ins with him in the past as well.
Yeah, but in fairness to him, though, like his point is, look, have a go at the big bookies all you like, and if you don't like me, that's fine. But he's trying to run a business. It's a small enough betting business, comparatively speaking, with your Paddy Powers, Flutters, whatever. And ultimately, at the end of the day, who he's feeling sorry for here is the poor young lad who paid out the money by mistake. And he's copping a lot of flack for this personally. And I'm sure he's, obviously Jeff is trying to assuage some of that, but it must be difficult. And I don't know. I think with these things, like if people notice the mistake and they didn't hand the money back, I think that's pretty rotten, to be honest with you. Okay, well, do you just want to explain, like how could this happen? Like, I mean, I presume Dave O'Reilly doesn't make these kind of mistakes, and if he does, I'm going to be texting him a lot more often to pay me out when I bet with AK books at the track. Like, do these mistakes happen regularly or not?
They wouldn't be that regular. There are two systems, Elite and RDT. So Elite is quite popular in the UK, from what I understand. RDT would be historically more popular in Ireland. There are a few stopgaps and safety mechanisms in the system that stop you basically making these mistakes, essentially. And I'd assume, I don't know what system Jeff is using, but I'd assume that he has options to use those mechanisms. So, like, for example, if a bet pays out over 500 quid, we have a safety thing in our system that the person on the back of the joint is essentially double checking that payout, essentially. And yeah, that works well for us. I think these mistakes can happen, and I'd imagine it's bad for the member of staff. But I'd also imagine it's quite bad for just Jeff in general, given the level of business and the fact that we run at 10% on course. So Jeff will, to get that 3,700 quid back, will probably have to turn over 37,000 to 40,000 pounds to theoretically get that money back. And I'd imagine that'll be tough enough.
He did call the police on this one, Harry, and maybe you could just give us some idea of whether or not he might have a case here. Even if they do find the person in question, are they criminally liable by not returning the money?
I think that it's likely to come down to their state of knowledge when they took the bet. Contractually, that this is the law of mistake, and they are obliged to pay the money back. In terms of criminality, it could amount to theft or a related offence like theft under the Theft Act. If at the time of taking the money, they knew that they'd been overpaid and that they didn't have any intention of repaying it. So that the difficulty, I suppose, the prosecutors would have was showing that they didn't walk off with the money by mistake. Now, a lot of us will say, well, how could they? I think the danger you'd have is someone saying, well, I don't really understand betting. Perhaps I was picking up my husband's slip or my wife's slip. And I was just handed what I was handed, and off I went. And I think the real difficulty is the police aren't going to investigate it. I'm not entirely convinced that they should be, given some of the things they don't investigate. But I think, look, if they did find this person, they would have some difficult questions to answer about why they haven't contacted Jeff to say, look, I think I've been overpaid at this stage. If they were genuinely walking off with, whatever it is, 10 times more money than they were entitled to by mistake, basically.
Yeah. And look, I think our thoughts here collectively are with the young fellow who made the mistake. He didn't mean to do it. According to Jeff's testimony, he's an honest guy, and it was a genuine mistake. So look, these things happen. You will learn from it. It's not one you're going to want to make again, and life moves on. I tell you who wouldn't have returned the money though, Tony Calvin, that blogger gobshite that walks around the place filming people, homeless people, standing outside restaurants just before he's about to go in and order steak tartare and lobster ravioli. And then when they ask him for a few quid, he says, no, I haven't got any. Decides to post it on his social media for a few likes and views. What in the name of Christ was he up to there?
It's a week of divisive characters, isn't it? We'll come on to Matt Chapman in a moment. But
I'm not putting Chapman in the same league as Blogger, for Christ's sake.
Well, yeah, a lot of people would have said the roles were reversed there. But no, he wouldn't be my cup of tea. I think you've got a more extreme version, and Anthony's got a kinder take on him, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he has bet with you in the past, AK, right? I mean, you've met him a few times.
Yeah, I was saying to you guys privately, I think you probably have to slightly separate, the online persona from the person. When I've dealt with him in person, he has been very genuine. He's been a very, very nice guy. People question the stakes he has and the bet slips he produces on social media. From my point of view, every bet he's had with me, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, is a substantial bet, and he's using his own money and betting away that way. So from an integrity point of view, from what I've seen, it stacks up. Don't
go losing your house, AK, or I'll leave you standing outside hungry and with no money.
Well, I think he was probably it was probably ill-advised that he played the last 4 seconds of that video. I'd say if that last 4 seconds wasn't in the video, I think it wouldn't have been as bad as it undoubtedly came across. I don't have any change in my pocket. I wouldn't have been able to give anybody change, and I think in hindsight, he might have cut that out. But then again, we live our lives online these days, and I would separate just people's online personas from the actual human.
Yeah. You mentioned Matt Chapman, TC. I'm hearing anybody who actually managed to win a race of the 2 days that he was presenting has applied for new eardrums and will be wearing earmuffs the next time. Such was the level of shouting going on when he was awarding the winner. What did you think? Are you a fan?
Not of that, no. Chapman's got some very good qualities, but they weren't on display when he was on the podium there, giving the prizes away. It was proper tumbleweed stuff on Wednesday and Thursday. It was a funny part on the Wednesday where they panned to the crowd when he was actually screaming, and it just seemed like deafening silence there, and people weren't interested. And the wonder is that he got the gig again on the following day. It was
chance to make amends.
It was pretty awful TV, wasn't it? And not his finest moments. And he's got a few to rival with.
Tough listen, those podium announcements from him. But what he does do well is the interviews that he doesn't do. I think his interviews with people like Johnny G are probably slightly towards the top of the cringe scale as well. But I think what he does do really, really well is the real stories with real people in and around the racetrack and the parade ring. And he's actually a really good interviewer when he focuses on that stuff. And if there's a story that needs teasing out of someone and being told, I think that is his forte. To be honest, he's exceptional at that. I think.
I think he does. I think he did the presentation thing on purpose. I can't believe it was anything other than intentional, and he was playing the pantomime villain, because if it wasn't intentional and then he just doubled down the next day, you'd seriously question what goes on upstairs there. What about Champions Full Gallop, lads? The season is over. Will they get the old Partridge second series, or is that in the can? Off you go. We're not wasting our money on any more Friday night ITV primetime slots with this kind of stuff. What do you think, Harry?
Well, I hope they do get a second series, but I hope they just take a very different approach to it and make it interesting, decide what the story is that they're selling. Far fewer talking heads. I think and quick cuts, and just a better way to sell racing. So I hope they do get a second series, but I hope they listen to a lot of the feedback that they've had, which has been pretty universally critical, really. I think we have to accept, or for the reasons I've given, which it just doesn't seem to have much structure, plot. It's badly edited, too many talking heads, not nearly enough about the horses themselves, too much about trainers and jockeys. I hope they do a better job next time. I
thought it was more a documentary about ITV racing than it was about racing. It was all the aforementioned people just saying how great everything is, giving their opinion. And didn't actually develop into any kind of editorial kind of line. Simon Holt put it interesting. He said it's been very superficial. I think superficial is the word. Not a patch on horsepower. Also too many talking heads. Disappointing, but a second series could be better if more focus on stable staff, horse welfare, and how the sport works. Tony, that's a fair summation, I think. Yeah,
I think it's just an opportunity missed, wasn't it? There was no editorial grit involved in the show. That we mentioned before, they had ample opportunity to delve into, Dan Skelton, Langer Dan, George Gently, etc. When they were showing him. It was just a bit of a PR powder puff piece, wasn't it? When it needed to be, like I said, it needed to be grittier. And, there's some surprising people come out and say how disappointing. I mean, you mentioned Simon Holt. I think Jess Stafford, who would be very close to Willie Mullins and Nikki Henderson, she came out and said she was disappointed with the content. And if they do get another opportunity, then hopefully they'll do it better. But, ITV Racing they're not long after winning a BAFTA, but this wouldn't have been an award-winning documentary, I wouldn't have thought. But you never know. You never
You
know.
never know. I've seen Anton Deck win BAFTAs 20 years in a bloody row, so anything's possible, Tony. Right, the Irish coming over to England, stealing your jobs, your women, your prize money. City of Troy, LA, Content, Extensio, Magical Zoe. What the hell's going on, Tony? British racing's falling off a cliff.
I know, yeah. About time we banned them coming over, isn't it? We have to extend that that series in that 60 race series in Ireland. We have to extend it to the UK. No, it was City of Troy is obviously it's 5 days after, and everything that's has to be said about him has already been mentioned, isn't it? So
Were you
yeah,
impressed?
it's like
You're not easily impressed. Were you impressed by City of Troy and what he did?
not particularly because I laid in winning place, and I had a bit of a bloodbath the kind of week at there's more blood in my hands than there was at AK's surgeon, but like he was like Ryan Moore. I don't ghostwrite his column anymore, but I imagine that would have been a plan to him to go out there. There was only one other pace angle in the race. That was a stablemate. Once they got that line sorted, it was him for there to take the initiative. So a brilliant, he's just a great rider, isn't he? And he stands apart when he gets on the big stage and the race means something. He tends to deliver. And now they're going to go for the Breeders' Cup Classic with him via a racecourse gallop at Wolverhampton or Southall, which would be like picking up a couple of cans of special brew on the way to Buckingham Palace for
the old special brew, huh? The old special brew, 75%. What do you think, AK? Few cans down the canal, you and me.
So, yeah, special brew. I haven't heard the term special brew since I was stacking shelves at Quicksilver as a 16-year-old. The fellas buying that stuff were always interesting to deal with. But it's all about the Mad Dog 2020 as a growing up kid in the north.
Yeah, they like their special brew in Australia, I can tell you. Vban, Melbourne Cup, that's where he's headed, Tony, and he did it by beating Point Lonsdale in a very impressive performance. I liked what I saw here.
Yeah, like you said, he was 92 favourite for the Melbourne Cup last year when he disappointed, but he looks to be going there, maybe via the Irish St Ledger. He might be going there along with Magical Zoe, who landed a little bit of a touch in the E-Ball, very impressively for Henry de Bromhead. So, just a number of Irish. I think there were 7 Irish victories on the week. You had the likes of Content and Los Angeles winning their races for Aidan O'Brien. Crucially, both were actually supplemented. So they got that one right. They weren't inexpensive. I know they can afford it, but they weren't inexpensive supplements. So they won as well. We had some good winners in Ireland as well. Your 16 grand to 1 cop with Bedtime Story after a few heart attacks.
She left it late though. She left it late. I was sweating. The old bum cheeks were going side to side.
Yeah, gamble responsibly, but it's always responsible when they win, isn't it? It was just like I said. I think one of the highlights of the week would have been Pat O'Donnell winning with Extensio. So there was the top end one and the bottom tier one as well. So you're Irish. Stay at home in future.
Stay at home. Well, I tell you what, and just before we leave the racing then, Martin Brazel confirmed during the week, TC, that Fast or Slow is going to go to the John Durkin and then the King George. He's currently 6-1 with AK Bets to win the King George. And he's the kind of horse at that type of track, 4 fences down the back straight, that I'm going to nibble away between now and St. Stephen's Day in Ireland, Boxing Day in the UK, and come the race itself, I'll have a nice little investment. And I think he's going to take all the beating Fast or Slow. That track, perfect for him. And I like 6-1. So that's my 2 cents before we leave the racing. Right, Harry, give us some legal expertise, if you don't mind. Poor old Callum Shepard, himself and James Doyle commit pretty much the same offence. In fact, you could make the argument that Shepard's offence was less than James Doyle in terms of riding out to the finish. Doyle gets off, Shepard gets 18 days. I mean, where is the justice in this?
It's very hard to see it. I don't understand the decision in the James Doyle case. I think I spoke a couple of weeks ago about how well James expressed himself in the televised stewards inquiry at Goodwood. And I think when he came out in an interview, he does a very good job. He's a very good advocate for himself. And I think he talked the stewards round. He said that the horse was essentially jinking as he approached the line, and that he became unbalanced. Even viewing the head on, I think all of us will have seen jockeys ride far stronger finishes, frankly, under much more difficult circumstances. And I think that he was perhaps quite clever in that he suggested that he may have fallen off the horse had he not stopped riding. And that may well have been what spooked the stewards at the time. But I just don't. The odd thing to me is I don't think the stewards were really entitled to do what they did there, because under the rules, as you read them, a jockey, not must take all reasonable steps to get the best possible placing, but must also be seen to do so. And the only exception under the rules is where F26, the horse is being pulled up. So basically, I think this is something of a pretty big fudge by the stewards, because they've gone somewhere in between. He's clearly not pulling the horse up. But they've basically allowed him an excuse where the rules don't really allow for an excuse. He is not, you cannot see him to ride a finish. That's that. And so the rules are then properly applied, in my view, in the case of poor old Callum Shepard, whose offence is, I think, much less serious to most of us. But I think that is how you apply the rules. He drops his hand just before the line. The rules are very strict.
So essentially then, like, James Doyle is the Perry Mason in the courtroom, whereas Callum Shepard is Lionel Hutz here, and they've been done on the strength of their arguments. Like, I mean, that seems bananas to me. And look, I know obviously the stewards are humans themselves and they're going to be open to persuasion, but the rules are pretty hard and fast. It seems ridiculous.
Yeah, the James Doyle one is for all his eloquence, pretty absurd. And the Callum Shepard one is rather unfair, and just suggests that really the rules are too harsh. Stewards should have. I think really what this shows is that there needs to be more discretion for the stewards to actually judge things on the basis of how bad they are, rather than have this hard and fast rule that if you stop doing anything before the line, you get these whacking great bans.
Tony, I was looking at a football, a rugby, and I know it's dangerous sometimes to kind of cross the lines here, but if you take the equivalent, say in a Premier League match, an 18-day ban, if you take one Premier League game per week, or even two in some cases, you're talking about 3 months worth of a ban for a Premier League football. That's the 18-day equivalent here. If we take it that, say, Callum Shepard would assume to ride 14 of the 18 days at a very minimum, that's what we're talking about. It's a huge suspension for him.
Yeah, I mean, the issue here is, I mean, the James Doyle case, I mean, he was riding a 6-5 on favourite there. So it had big ramifications for punters, as did Callum Shepard, because he should have won outright and it was a dead heat, and obviously punters are only getting half their stake at full odds. So it had betting ramifications there. I mean, the Shepard case is further heightened by the fact he's come out and basically posted a picture of the photo finish, which suggests that he actually won the race outright. But as I understand it, Harry, the jockey can't appeal the photo finish.
The jockey can't appeal the result, because strictly speaking, that's not his interest. That's the owners. He can appeal the ban. He can say that he didn't stop riding, basically, or he can try this James Doyle argument, the new argument, which is I did stop riding, but
yeah. It's not the first time there's been a dead heat scenario. I mean, Hong Kong in October 2023, they banned Vincent Ho for 5 weeks after he only dead heated. They think he should have won outright. So even though he technically won the race, he didn't win it outright, and that affects punters, etc. And if you're talking about Callum Shepard copping it, I think for the amounts of money that are going on in Hong Kong, a 5-week ban out there, even though I think they only race twice a week, would have been pretty costly for Ho as well. So there is a precedent for an international precedent for what Callum Shepard did. But I think we can all agree that Doyle used up quite a lot of his luck.
Just one question for you, Tony. We had a quick chat about it the other day on the WhatsApp. Have you seen the BHA's better photograph yet? Has that been released of the finish?
I haven't seen it. They came out and defended the judge's decision, but obviously the picture that Shepard posted was very, very grainy, but it did seem to back up what he said, that he did win outright. But presumably the BHA have looked at it and said, no, we think it's a dead heat. But I haven't seen a clearer picture. And it's interesting that one of the major racing TV producers, stroke directors, Bruce Clements, come out and said, this is an own goal for the BHA. What are we doing in 2024? Posting photo finish pictures like that where it's nearly impossible to ascertain who won it. I mean, surely there must be, better, picture quality considerations out there for them to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. It's something I'm sure that's going to, rear its head again. We'll deal with it. And as and when it does, something that reared its head on the podcast last week, Tony, was the tote I mentioned in my introduction, seeding and betting into pools. You've been offered the chance to be a tote brand ambassador this week, I hear. How much money are you charging for that?
Probably as long as they don't pursue me and put me in jail for 10 years, I'll take a
5 cans of special brew a week they've offered you. 5 cans of special brew a week. You can't turn that down, mate.
No, I think they won't be opened and they'll put them over my head. But the situation with the Totes, I mean, since last week's show, which I gather the Tote weren't particularly happy about, but as I've said numerous times on X, and I'll say it again on here, they've always got the right to reply if they don't think anything's accurate or whatever. But I think what we said last week was pretty accurate. Since then, I've had a lot of people come on to me directly, direct messages on Twitter with some follow-up articles. What I would say is, obviously, we talked about seeding and how it was, and betting into their own pools, and how, in my opinion, that's not desirable. But they pointed to the fact that they have in their T's and C's on their website, they admitted to the fact they do that. Curiously, they say they don't do it for profit and they make a loss on that. Subsequently, I've had someone got in touch with me, and he's been a constant feeder of information for me in this area for about the last 3 years. He got in touch and say, well, things may have progressed a bit on the seeding front into the UK, all the UK pools, but that's for the Tote to clarify. It might be the situation where they still do make a loss there, but I think punters betting into the Tote are entitled to know about the operators' involvement in their own markets. And there was a few other issues as well. Someone got in touch with me about the ramifications of Oisin Murphy weighing in light, delayed settlements of the UK and international pools, which caused mayhem in the Hong Kong markets for over an hour, because they can't progress to race 4 until race 3 is settled, and that took over an hour. So the onus is on the BHA and the UK racecourses to actually facilitate that kind of betting by more prompter decisions on the steward's side. And the main point of contention, it was brought to focus me. I didn't clock it because I wasn't really looking for it. And they've asked, the person who pointed this out has asked them not even to be his title or he was quite well known in the industry. He actually pointed out to me, and I checked again the next day. Now, the racing TV was showing the live World Pool prices, but crucially, they were showing all the prices to 2 decimal points, 14.95, etc. But when the price, getting my train of thought here, when the price dipped below the current SP price in the UK, they actually just put the Tote guarantee price up. So the example I was sent a screenshot of, and I went and checked subsequent races, and it was true that, for example, Heaven's Gate was showing as paying 3.0 on the World Pool prices on the racing TV ticker down the bottom. But in fact, on the World Pool prices and on the live price, it was only 2.35. So I don't think that's on whatsoever. When is a live price not a live price? When there's a Tote guaranteed price, but that shouldn't be a consideration, because you want a live price. I think you should be obliged to show the true price it is trading at, not the price you will get if you got the guarantee in the UK. I mean, what I would say, the UK and the Hong Kong markets and the World Pool markets are separate. For example, the Tote don't seed into the World Pool price. But by the same token, you've got to have some kind of clarity. You've got to have some kind of transparency. And to actually put on there, Heaven Gate was trading at 3, when in fact she was trading at 2.35. I don't think that's on myself.
Yeah, I'd be of the same opinion, to be honest with you. It feels disingenuous to me. It's just not a price that's available. And if your whole marketing strategy is to say we will at least match the SP, well, changing the fact that the 2.35 is 3.0, and that's a bookmaker price, but it isn't the SP. It's just the price that it's being traded at present. It's apples and pears. You're comparing two different things there, and I think customers that are betting into those pools. I also think as well, it probably just shows how thin that ecosystem is. There's probably just not that much in there, and it's essentially being propped up by the guarantee and the smoke and mirrors around the pricing. And I just also think as well, if the Tote are betting into those pools, and we don't know, they seem to acknowledge that they are. We don't know to what extent. It could be to quite a large extent. And if they are betting into those pools to smooth out pricing deficiencies, they could potentially, and I'm not saying it's happening, but it could potentially be betting into those pools contrary to the best interest of their own customers. And that would be my issue with that, if that is the case.
Okay.
Yeah, we should clarify that they don't bet into the whirlpool prices. They don't bet into the whirlpool markets, but they do bet into the UK markets. And the suggestion that was given to me is they are doing that increasingly so. And obviously, those terms and conditions were when the Tote launched a while ago. So that needs clarification. And the last Tote angle of the week is we won't be doing this every week, so they can rest easy. There was a very strange article by Will Woodhams in The Sun, which suggested if you're going to have a bet of £10 or under, you should do it with a Tote and presumably not his company. Did you find that surprising, Anthony?
Yeah, I've never met Will, but he seems very friendly, and I've had some interactions with him online, and I'm still hoping to get an invite to the Fitsters Club in the Cotswolds. So I'll be easy on my opinions here, but I think he has some involvement with something called the Racing app. The Racing app have done a deal with Tote, and he's probably thrown those quotes out of there as part of that sponsorship that's happening, and the connection between the commercial relationship between those two parties. It's obviously nonsense, in my opinion. If you're betting fivers and tenors, you're not going to be making much of a dent anyway. But there are much better options outside of the Tote. The quality of product on the Tote is essentially win markets and a couple of very other minor markets. On-course bookmakers destroy Totes when there's a free market, just because of the depth of market and how they can service customers much better than Totes, essentially.
Fitstairs Lounge do a very good 2-for-1 special on pints of Happy Brew during happy hour. So if you're going over, AK, and you get a +1, will you make sure you stick me on the list as well? I won't wear this hoodie. I'll take the hoodie off, I promise.
Happy Brew, special brew, we'll drink it all. It's all good.
Here's the question for you guys. Like, how much do you think you could tell about a person in the UK by what newspaper they read? Harry, maybe this is one for you. Like, for example, if I said to you, "Hello, Harry, my name is Hugh, and I read the Daily Express every day. I would never miss it." What assumptions would you make about me based on that?
I'd assume you haven't read anything that remotely resembles the truth for a very long time.
that and the Daily Sport's gone bust as well.
My two favourite rags gone. What am I going to do with my time? Look, the Telegraph have had an interesting editorial shift, shall we say, over the last few weeks. For those who read enough of the Telegraph, perhaps to notice this, but they did have an interesting piece last weekend, Harry, which you spotted about horses, riding horses, and maybe a few conclusions around the care thereof. Can you tell us a bit more about this, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's an article called "Why It Might Be Time to Stop Riding Horses" in the Telegraph magazine. Some very well-meaning people were interviewed who do a lot for horse welfare themselves. Some of them have taken on a number of horses and don't ride them, and that's their big project, is to try and convince everyone else to stop riding horses, and indeed to go on beyond that. But you do end up with some pretty extraordinary outbursts, frankly. One of them is quoted as saying, "Horse riders tell me that their horses love being ridden, but it would probably prefer to have a run around without you on its back. It just wants to get out of its small stable space." And you sort of wonder why these people think that the options available to horses are either to have people ride on them and to live in stables, or to, you know, open up a microbrewery in Hackney and, you know, live with its mates and DJ at the weekend. You know, that we have to face the world as we meet it, rather than the world as we'd like it to be. And you know, we have this chat from Animal Aid, and Animal Aid are the ones who really want to stop horse racing altogether, as I understand it, saying horses are in a dystopia, but what is their fate ultimately if we don't use them for any human activity? Do they merely become companions, and who would provide for them? I mean, the naivety of the question is astounding. What would happen is you would have to euthanize a large number of thoroughbred racehorses, and it would probably lead to the extinction of the breed. Horse racing is the caretaker of the thoroughbred breed. You know, it's a little bit like saying to children, well, you know, they don't like going to school, they don't like being put to bed. Fine, all right, let's let them loose on the planet and see how they get on. The difficulty is that we do need to care for them. You know, this is a breed of animal that requires care. It can't be unleashed on you know, Holland Park.
Yeah, but that's the AK school of parenting, by the way. Let the kids run riot and do whatever the hell they like. And let's see where the chips fall.
And they'll all end up licensed bookmakers as a result. Yeah.
And I'd echo what you said about some very well-meaning people. Deluded fantasists, I think, is the collective term that I'd give to them. Right, okay. Just a couple of other stories, guys, before we go on to the listener questions, one of which, the Curragh over the weekend. I was looking at, obviously, Ryan Moore decided to duck the Ebor AK in favour of riding some of the Ballydoyle Coolmore 2-year-olds, promising 2-year-olds ahead of next season, and looked like a good decision. There was a couple of eye-catching performances there. But in terms of the bookmaker numbers that turned up at the Curragh for that class of horse, and potentially we're talking about like superstar multi-million-pound horses here versus Killarney, there was chalk and cheese, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we obviously, we're invested in the Curragh because we stand there, and we also stand at Killarney as well. But there's just such a disconnect between what people want and what they're being served up at certain tracks. Makes total sense for Ryan Moore to come over to the Curragh and ride those horses. I think the flip side of that is most people in Ireland probably would have rather been at Killarney or York rather than the Curragh. 13 bookmakers at the Curragh, 13 actual individual bookmakers turning up at the Curragh on a Saturday to watch decent level racing and potential superstars of the future as well. And the flip side of that is 35 are turning up at Killarney, which is a much lesser grade of horse, because the serviced in a fairly tight enclosed area. There's a bit of atmosphere. The Curragh just, and it's not just that weekend as well. It's essentially every time they race. If there's a corresponding fixture in Ireland, be it Kilbeggan, be it anywhere else, the vast majority of bookmakers and patrons are turning up at the alternative to the Curragh. And this, I know that the money that's been invested there, but it's not great. It's not great. And if that's your premier track, it's actually really sad. I remember when I moved to Ireland in 2008, and those Budweiser Irish derbies and what was going on at the Irish Derby, crowd wise, and the crack in the town and everything. It was brilliant. And it's just how it can go from that to close to zero is bewildering to me.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And look, the Curragh, it doesn't lend itself to a great atmosphere. Look, and you know, it pains me to say it because it does host some of the prime fixtures across the flat season and the summer, but it just does not lend itself to a good atmosphere. The design is all wrong. The stand is all wrong. But look, I guess
the bookmakers, again, I know I'm invested in that side of it, but the bookmakers are parked miles away. I was told that the bookmakers aren't in front of the stand because they would ruin the aesthetic of the stand.
Quite right.
Somebody at the Curragh. Quite right. Probably right. but they'd get people through the door if they were there. So rather than empty stand.
Yeah, they'd ruin the aesthetic of this massive block of concrete stuck in the middle with a worse wind draft than Tony Calvin after 12 points of Guinness. Like, I mean, what aesthetic? Absolutely crazy stuff. Harry, what about this investigation into the date of the general election? I think the Gambling Commission are open to kind of investigate this if they want, but as regards a police investigation, I think it's pretty much done and dusted. Is that the right reading of it?
I think that's right. I think the police have said they're not going to do it, and they have said that the regulator still has the option to do it. I don't think the regulator will go anywhere near this with a barge pole. Whenever they've done any kind of prosecutions, as I understand it, they've always really done it hand in hand with a police force. If the police aren't getting involved, I just don't think, frankly, I don't think they've got enough experience or expertise. I don't think they'll touch it with a barge pole. And were they to do so, personally, I think it would be massively disproportionate. I don't think the offences justify this level, would justify an investigation. But also, I just don't think the industry wants to open up what the meaning of cheating is under the Act, because if it's mishandled, I think the law of unintended consequences could be very painful. So I don't think they will, and I very much hope they won't.
Yeah, I think everyone would echo that. And then finally, from your point of view, and a legal point of view, Sam James, 34-day suspension for overuse of the whip under the totting up rules. But this is another example, I guess, Harry, of the BHA's disciplinary process being ridiculously overlong and unnecessarily complicated.
Yeah, look, just quickly. So initially, the BHA proposes a 34-day ban and says that it's like a similar offence or list of offences to Marco Gianni, who got a 34-day ban. Sam James then says, well, actually, I don't think it's 34 days. I want a disciplinary hearing and to try and get it down. A few days before the disciplinary hearing, he says, actually, no, okay, 34 days is about right. But the disciplinary panel says, no, I want you in anyway. So we have a hearing, and I've been to a very similar hearing like this with a jockey, and they're very odd. Is you turn up as the jockey saying 34 days, the BHA turns up going 34 days, and the disciplinary panel basically sits there listening to you agree with each other before going, yep, 34 days. So, I'm not sure that is a brilliant example of the use of racing's limited resources. We've got a fast track procedure, and I think that there's obviously no particular reason it's very hard to see any particular reason, given that the panel ultimately said yes, 34 days, why it needed to hear arguments from either side. So it's a pity they didn't follow the fast track. And I suspect the BHA share that view.
Before we go to the questions, lads, apropos of Barry Hearn last week and the interview he did with Star Sports and Betting People, himself and Eddie are teaming up for a new Netflix series, Father and Son, The Greatest Showman, coming to Netflix soon worldwide. I think this is a great idea. I think it'll make for fascinating viewing, and two guys who like to talk, who know how to sell things. I'm looking forward to this. Anyone else? TC, would you have a strong view on this one?
No. Are you looking for a bit of boxing angle there, are you?
What's that?
You're looking for a bit of a boxing angle there, so you can
Eddie Hearn fascinates me. So I think to see himself in the relationship with his dad, two very successful businessmen. The boxing world has gone to absolute shit in some ways in terms of fighters being able to avoid each other. But as we were talking in a WhatsApp group this week, racing is doing the similar. You can have so many different races now that the best horses don't meet each other till Cheltenham. Boxing is very much the same. But Eddie Hearn is making an awful lot of money from it. And look, I'll be an interested spectator anyway. On Netflix.
You've seen those talking heads in Champions Full Gallop, and you want to be on there, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
With your excessive daily rate, stating the bleeding obvious.
Here's a face you just love to punch. Hugh Cal, what do you think about your opinion on anything? Right, let's move on to questions if you don't mind. And we've had a few in. TC, thank you for putting out the shout, as always. Two in a similar vein here, Tony. So we'll deal with the informant first. Tarmar Khan had a heavy fall in the Ebor, plus Nakib gave him a good kick for good measure. In this day and age, for health concerns and extra safety measures, what's your opinion on the jockeys being able to ride just half an hour later? It wouldn't happen on a rugby pitch, Tony.
No, it's the overarching element here is that I think sportsmen and sportswomen have to be protected from themselves. And we obviously follow rugby quite a lot, and the HIA protocols, and they're even if the rugby player says I'm absolutely fine, they'll go on there and they'll literally drag him off if needs be. So I think they need to be protecting from themselves. In this instance, we don't know how injured Tom Marquand was, but he clearly took a bit of a shoeing from the fatal fall of Crystal Delight. Incidentally, the ITV handled that really well. They didn't shy away from it. Didn't shy away from that kind of incident and the fallout. So well done them there. But Marquand rode in the next race at his lowest rate he's ridden at all season, and he won on the very well backed 7-2 favourite El Monjed. But immediately after that race, Haggis, the trainer of El Monjed, was interviewed, and he said, "I've got to go and check on Tom because he's not very well." And so obviously that begs the question, you know, how bad was he before riding El Monjed, and how he passed the doctor. Now that's a separate interview, and Marquand did step down after riding that winner, and he didn't ride on Sunday, so presumably he's in reasonably bad shape. But yeah, I mean, how he passed the doctor, I don't know. That Paddy Aspel, when the question was asked, and there was a bit of to and fro on Twitter yesterday, Paddy Aspel said, "Well, actually, adrenaline gets you through the doctor." I'm not sure that's really a positive for the sport if that's true. And he pointed out that Jack Kennedy rode with a broken foot throughout Punchestown, which was news to me. And if that's the case, then you know that's not a great look for the sport.
And the jockey's title was on the line for him as well during that Punchestown week. I think you're right, though. I think that sports people do need protecting from themselves in the same way that homeless people need protecting from the blogger with his phone. I think it is. You can draw an analogy there.
Yeah,
but anyway,
just on that, I think as well. Just to finish on it, I think protecting from themselves is definitely just given the nature of the job and how the relentlessness of wanting to win, I'd say, and the character required to reach the top in some of these sports. But for me, this is a huge thing, and we can talk about the animal aids of this world and stuff like that, and being down on racing. But if something goes wrong in this regard, the danger and the carnage involved is astronomical, and it can't be allowed to happen. Just can't be allowed to happen.
You know, if you move it to horses,
not only protecting themselves. It's not only protecting themselves; it's protecting other people in that environment as well. Yeah. Well, I remember, you know, Tony McCoy passing the doctor in the likes of Dunwoody. I mean, Dunwoody literally rode with one arm for the, you know, the concluding years of his career, and you see pictures of Tony McCoy getting down after winning on a horse. I mean, the guy could hardly walk, and how, you know, it's not a great look for the sport if they are passing jockeys when they're clearly not fit to ride, or if they are fit to ride, then barely.
Yeah, and legally as well, duty of care wise, Harry. I mean, we see this in rugby now. There's a mass action lawsuit against World Rugby by players who suffer from concussion and say they weren't protected enough. Like, you know, the potential for legal ramifications here in horse racing, they're not exempt from that.
I think that's right. I mean, now's not the time to discuss it, but I think the BHA remains very open to trouble should a serious accident happen as a result of interference in races. Obviously, I did Freddie Taliski's play many years, well, getting on for many years ago now. You know, this was an area that I spoke about a lot at the time. Not much has changed. The rules on careless riding remain absurd. And I do think the regulator might find itself in the crosshairs if we have another Taliski.
Okay, a few more to get to. John Joe Lang, Bar Stewart, audience injured by Lake Forest antics in the stalls before the City of York Stakes. Negligence from not to have him backed out and checked over if there was a problem caused by the second valve. I guess the point here is, Tony, if there are any Peter warriors watching in there, you know, any excuse to kind of blow the horn about horse welfare. Is that a fair point?
Well, it was brought into sharp focus because audience was, especially after the withdrawal of Lake Forest, audience was probably about a 2-7 chance, and it ran below par in fourth. And there were some suggestions from people, pundits on TV, that suggesting the horse wasn't letting himself down, didn't look right. And he was in the stall next to Lake Forest when that got withdrawn. And I couldn't find anything in the stewards report about any concerns that they had about audience's well-being. The only thing I could find about this is that Melissa Jones from the aforementioned Express, I think she was telling the truth, but Harry might suggest otherwise.
Sure she was.
But she writes for the Mirror and the Star as well. So she said, she quoted John Dunlop, said the horse stung himself when hitting the stalls when all that raucous was going on with Lake Forest. But it'll be a big call if you're not entirely sure, and to actually pull a 2-7, you know, poke out of a race. And also, I mean, presumably, Rab Havlin wasn't that bothered because he was prepared to ride the horse, and the last thing I'd imagine he'd want to do is ride an injured horse. Coming back to the earlier point about the injuries, etc. The last thing he'd want to do is doing that. So, in the absence of a steward's report and the absence of the jockey being prepared to ride, I've got nothing really to add there. I mean, it's just because the horse ran below par. If the horse had, if John Johnson would have reported that and the horse had won, there wouldn't have been any story or any question whatsoever. But I can see where John Joe's coming from, definitely.
Okay. I have a feeling this answer might be short, AK. With Flutter, this is from Joe McNally. With Flutter's chief saying recently in a Racing Post article that they no longer make money from betting on racing, is it time to take a serious look at a Tote Monopoly for UK racing? I think I know what you're going to say here, mate. Yeah. He's got his hands up to his face for those of you listening on podcast.
The old Tote Monopoly, it raises its head every now and then, and it's just never going to happen, and it won't happen because nobody bets on the Tote. It's an inferior product, as previously mentioned 1 million times, compared to fixed odds bookmakers. If you removed fixed odds bookmakers' ability to take bets on horse racing tonight and started from tomorrow morning with the Tote, horse racing would collapse pretty quickly in this country, and the black market would probably be where AK bets would be moving to, and just continue.
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't.
No, we wouldn't, Harry. We'll get intervention there.
Just the hoodies are back. That's it.
You wouldn't be moving. You've already moved.
There you go. Toot Aku says, having been in the on-course and online industry, again, this is for you, AK, for a while now, what would Anthony have done differently with the benefit of hindsight? And what was the worst business mistake made in that time, AK? Apart from hiring Calvin, Stuart Moore and myself, is there anything else that you really regret you hadn't done?
Yeah, it's not so much that we hadn't done. Listen, you learn from all your mistakes, don't you? One of the biggest changes in policy, not in policy, but like in just my general understanding, and I had an inkling this was the case, but didn't realize how mass market it was, is that price is just not one of the levers that moves customers in the main for acquisition and retention. Essentially, it's all around what offers you're doing, what money backs you're doing, I suppose. For me, the big things that move our customers are just the customer journey, how easily they can move around the app, how seamlessly they can place bets without restrictions on stakes and of that nature. Customer services, just in general, just being able to service customers well and deal with their problems with a human at the end of the email and responding quickly. Just withdrawals, how quickly you process people's withdrawals. I think the vast majority of people would take 4 to 5 and the withdrawal being back in their account in 2 hours rather than taking 10 to 11 and waiting 2 days for it. So it's kind of, it's just interesting that I think people who listen to this podcast and who follow horse racing and might bet semi-seriously maybe don't have the visibility of the things that actually matter to the vast majority of consumers. And it's often not price, as is seen sometimes on odds checker with some of the big bookmakers taking a lot of margin.
Well, the working class lads like you and me, TC, we'd appreciate the money back in our accounts instantly. But for the Eton boys, the posh boys like our good friend Harry here, he can wait 2 or 3 weeks, no problem for his cash back, right?
And the rest, yeah.
I was quite. It's a bit of an in-joke, this, but I think his biggest regret was not pressing record at 9:30 this morning.
Oh, we're going to do this, are we? Okay, dear listeners, if we sound slightly inauthentic on this one, it's because it's the second fucking time we've had to do it. Didn't press record. Tricks all in. The guys have wins with maths, but apparently not pressing the right button at 9:30 on a Monday morning.
Yeah, no, it's fuck off. I've got no response to it. It won't happen again. Apologies.
Right. It won't happen again. Listen, it's been a pleasure again. One more question, and perhaps the most important topic of all in this wonderful hour of racing chat. Simon Cohen wants to know, what's everyone's favourite flavour of ice cream? I'm going to go with chocolate. If you could do a chocolate special brew, Simon, I'd definitely get in with that. AK?
It's mint chocolate chip, for sure.
Right. Tony?
Vanilla.
Vanilla. Oh, nice and vanilla, like your personality. Good stuff. I like it.
Yeah, like that. There's a good shop in Wimbledon Village I was at a couple of Sundays ago, and like 60, 70 flavours, and like I said, I think they were going to ring in the police when I went with vanilla. It's but you have to go with what you like.
Can I have a vanilla ice cream cone, please? Okay, boomer. And finally yourself, Harry.
I'd probably go for pheasant, I think.
More like peasant.
Pheasant while reading The Guardian over a nice brandy and coffee. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. Download the AK Bets app for all your latest offers and for all your top prices across a range of sports. That's our lot for the week. We're all off to video some homeless people before going into the Ritz-Carlton for a fillet steak to post it on social media for likes and views. No, of course we're not, because that would be absolutely mental behaviour. Good luck.